to The Trouble with Football, the show where football's irritations get the spotlight they deserve. Each episode, I sit down with a fellow fan and podcaster who has a bone to pick with the powers that be about our beautiful game. Big or small, serious or stupid, no topic is off limits. And today, my guest with a gripe is Steff Shirazi. Now, he spent several decades as a writer, podcaster, covering the music scene and in particular Metallica. He's also, though, the host of the Games About Glory podcast. It started in, I think, 2021 and it's been strong ever since. It's for Tottenham fans, by the way, and I think it's probably best just to say, hey, Steff, how are you?
Hello, Neil. How's it going? Nice to be here.
Thank you so much for coming on. I know you've got a hot topic to talk to me about, but before I do that, I want to welcome you properly and I want to understand a bit about you.
Oh,
First of all...
Shall I settle in comfortably and close my eyes?
Tell me your life story. No, listen, I suppose what I want to ask first of all is the obvious question. Tottenham Hotspur, how are you a Tottenham Hotspur fan? Tell me why.
So my father supported another team. One of my we call family friends, a deep family friend, one of those that you call an uncle, who isn't an uncle but kind of is. He was a big Tottenham supporter. It was the mid-70s. I went, dragged along by my dad, to see his team play at Tottenham with Charlie, Uncle Charlie, that is. And I will never forget coming up the wooden. The whole ground was wooden then. It was the old White Hart Lane was Archibald Leach, designed, lots of wood. Climbing the stairs and the thunderous sound of just everyone like stamping. It was a night game, so you're coming up and it's sort of like you're ascending a stairway into some sort of heaven, if you will. The floodlights were there, the white of the shirts, Alfie Conn's hair, which was rampant and wild, like I fancied myself as a 8-year-old at that point, 8-year-old. And the whole thing was just so overpowering. I'm like, I love this. And then I saw the cockerel and I'm like, what a logo. And then, Uncle Charlie, quote unquote, was a cool kind of dude as well. So I'm like, I think this is it. I think I'm suckered. And so it started then. And then I actually started to get to go regularly in the late 70s. So right. That was when I first started to really go regularly. I was set free by my parents to do my best or worst.
So you're a fan, obviously, from a lifetime's perspective. So it does mean that you have seen glory, you have seen trophies.
Oh, yeah.
In the 70s, the 80s, the 90s, there were European trophies, there were FA Cups. There was lots going on actually with Spurs.
Well, yeah.
I mean, they were one of the bigger teams. Let's be honest.
Yeah, it was. Look, Ozzy and Ricky came. That was exciting. Keith Birkinshaw had survived, he'd survived relegation, which was never really his fault. He had Terry O'Neill's team to deal with. He rebuilt the side. He was fortunate. Glenn Hoddle started to hit his prime. He bought Archibald and Crooks, and suddenly, within the space of 4 years, you've got 2 FA Cups. You had the UEFA Cup, which is now the Europa League, obviously. A Cup Winners' Cup we should have had in 1982 had we not been kicked off the pitch by Barcelona and cheated out of the semi-final. That's for another story, another pod. I'm sure you don't want to spend 20 minutes hearing me gripe about that, do you?
We're okay.
But so it's very fair to say that, I think that decade in particular, the 80s, I think we were sort of a preeminent team when it came to playing attractive football. I really feel that, and that's where I fell in love with the Tottenham Hotspur brand, which had been, again, we go back to Alfie Conn and his hair, right? There was always a maverickness about Tottenham that appealed to me. So, but it really came to fruition on the field at that time as well, yeah.
And if we fast forward to literally last season under Ange Postecoglou, I just wanted to get your take because it must have been such a strange mix of emotions last season because of, the league form, the stress of that, but then ultimately winning a European trophy at the other end of it. Like, how do you look back at things for last season?
So, well, indirectly, we are going to have a ramp into what this pod is going to get into, and it's a major factor. Let me just start with the injuries. I mean, we had key injuries. Massive amounts of them. I mean, I believe actually the only club that had as many injuries as us was yours.
Yeah, Brighton. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. I would always say that for us, I felt that we had maybe the most key injuries in the league in terms of the players that he really needed for his system to work
I agree.
versus the players he actually was able to put out. And, I will always remember last season with fondness, but also with a sense of I suppose, if I'm honest, still a little angry because I just think he got the rawest of raw deals in terms of perception from both fans and actually the media. I think he was incredibly poorly treated, and I think that the M word, mitigation, was never really applied to him with regards to those injuries. I mean, it was apparently his fault. It wasn't the fault of football for overplaying all these players for the last 3-4 years since COVID. It was suddenly because, of Ange Postecoglou's training methods that all these injuries were happening, which I suppose is how, Bukayo Saka also got hurt and various other key players throughout the Premiership. It's probably all Ange's fault. So I found that really distasteful to the point, and I will share this with you, and I can't remember if I've actually said this on the Game Is About Glory. I had the chance to go to Bilbao and I chose not to because because the situation with the support base felt so toxic to me. I didn't want any part of it. And I don't like toxic fans. I don't like fans booing at players. I don't like any of that. I'm one of those people who stand up and oppose that. I'm not into it. And, given where we are in the world today, don't need one more aggravating situation like that. I mean, I'll also admit on the side, I didn't know if I could suffer a second, 48-hour trip to a Spanish capital from the West Coast ending in tears. There was an element of that because the 2019 Champions League final broke me. However, I found the fractiousness of the season really, really disturbing, actually, really, really disturbing. Obviously, the payoff was fantastic. It was great, and the celebrations were great to see. But 10 years from now, someone will do a book about that season and just what an absolute miracle it was that he pulled off. I mean, it was.
Yeah, I agree.
I agree. Maybe not one in a million, but definitely one in infinitely small odds.
Yeah. Listen, you mentioned the podcast there, The Game Is About Glory.
Yes.
I wondered if you could just tell me a little bit about that. First of all, for maybe people that aren't quite understanding of exactly where that title comes from, if you could explain that, and then tell me a bit more about the podcast, if you can.
Well, there's Danny Blanchflower's famous quote, which is, about not sitting around and waiting for the other lot, but boring your pants off, basically. You should go and look it up. I'm not going to, seriously, it's well worth the research, but it does start with The Game Is About Glory. And it's an ethos that Tottenham Hotspur, we feel, is all about. I mean, it's the identification of, I think, who we should be. Whether we have been all the time in the last decade, at least, is questionable given some of the managers we've chosen. But you asked about the podcast, so let me get back on track. There's a forum that we're all a part of. gloryglory.co.uk, which is, it's been around for a long, long time, and, you exchange views, and I don't do much of that, but that is a place that I've been for a long time, and it's a good community as far as online communities go. It's really good, and we all generated from there a really good chat called Amar, was kind of threw the suggestion out, why don't we get together and do a podcast, and he waited to see who would bite. Surprisingly to you, I'm sure I was one of the first people to bite. I'm sure you can't figure out why that would be. Yeah, and Milo was in there too, and Ram, and we had some other people as well. Ricky was in there as well. We good core team, and obviously Gareth, who you all know has since become an author and has written a couple of books about Spurs. Excellent forensic. Entertaining yet forensic books on Spurs. So it sort of came together during COVID. I think it was sort of a way of, I don't know, maybe communicating and another step forward. But what we found and what we believe implicitly is that there has to be balance, that not every podcast can be people screaming their joys or dissatisfactions every 5 minutes. And so we always try and find some balance if we can, and we always try and look beyond the curtain, if you will, to see the whys behind a situation or something that's happening.
That's a nice way to look at it. That's a really nice way to look at it. Listen,
And
it's
then
it's a really good pod. I've really enjoyed listening to it. Actually, I listen to it from time to time. I was saying off air to you that my mum used to be an absolute avid Spurs fan, and she always wanted to try and listen to as many podcasts as possible. So I've I've listened to your pod quite a lot, and it's a really good pod.
thank you. And I've got to say that, whenever Ram's on, he and I behave like children, which is great. He just brings out the best in me in that sense. Milo might say the worst, but we have a great time, and Gareth as well is another fantastic contributor. So we've got a great team.
Well, speaking of acting like children, I think it's probably time to get to the main event.
Right.
I'm aware that you've got something you want to get off your chest, so I suppose it's that time. Listen, Steff, tell me, what do you think is the trouble with football?
Well, Neil, the trouble with football is the oversaturation of media in the modern game. The amount of press conferences, appearances, more appearances, maybe a few more appearances after that managers and players are being not just asked to do, but apparently contractually required to do. I think it's an absolute joke. It sort of does scale along with the accelerated amount of football that players are having to play. So I suppose we're in this society where more is better, which is not anything I've ever subscribed to. And I think we can be perfectly clear that when you look at the weakening quality of the interviews that come in the press conferences in particular, and I will focus on the managerial press conferences for a moment, the pre-match and post-match and so on. I mean, the quality level, I mean, this is like, they're becoming like the weakest cup of tea that you've ever had. I mean, nobody's even bothering to stew the bag anymore. It's just pour the water in and just slam a mug of this murky hot liquid down your neck. It's ridiculous. I mean, let me give you an example.
Go for it.
You've got 2, possibly 3 press conferences a week that these managers have to do, right? Let's say you're in a European competition. It's going to be 3.
Okay.
And let's not get into whether you count it as 2 games a week or 3 games a week. It's 3 games a week. Yeah. I'm saying it's 3 games a week. Okay. So you've got the pre-match, right, where they have to sit there. Then you've got the interviews they have to do after the game. Then you've got another post, you've got the post-match. Then you've got the press conference they have to do for the next game, which is usually within 2 or 3 days.
Yeah.
So I did a rough calculation for Thomas Frank. From November 6th to December 4th, I calculated Thomas Frank had done at least 9, if not more, press conferences. My mathematics is awful. So, let's take it at this. Man United, that game is on November the 8th. So you've got a pre-match and a post-match for that. Then he did have a break. Thankfully, he could recharge his batteries for the next assault here, which was Arsenal, November the 23rd, pre-match and post-match. Right? PSG was on the 26th. So he had to do a press conference on the 25th and then a post-match one. Fulham was on the 29th. This is all of November. Press conference on the 27th. He'd just given a press conference after the match in Paris, right? Okay. Yeah. Newcastle, the 2nd, pre-match presser, right? He's just done another press conference yesterday. It feels like a sort of cruelty to keep putting him up there.
The other thing to consider, though, Steph, is also like when you say like post-match, that's not one interview.
No, it's not.
Like if it's a TV game, he'll talk to Sky, then he'll talk to BBC separately, then he'll talk to radio, then he'll go into the press room and talk to all the pressers. Right. Then he might do a radio interview. And then after all of that, he'll probably go out onto the pitch and sit there for, if you've probably got like a Spurs TV or something, haven't you? So
absolutely.
You do a club one as well, So he's spending a good part of the next hour and a half of his time doing probably about another 5 interviews, which is classing one interview, but it's not, is it?
Well, I mean, and then you have to consider that he's obviously in an exceptionally calm and collected emotional state because it's right after a football match that he's just been intrinsically involved with. And then you've got people who turn around and hammer either social media or even some of the beat reporters themselves will hammer him for saying something that was either less than spectacular or bland. Or they'll hammer him for not saying something that was spectacular and wasn't bland. Or they'll just hammer him. Or they'll just say his job's under threat. Or they'll just say he's handling the pressure well. Or they'll just say anything that isn't remotely positive about the interaction that's happened. So, and fans also, I mean, we talk about wanting, wanting the managers to be honest. I mean, honestly speaking, anyone out there listening to this pod, imagine that after you've finished a hard day at work, where maybe you've had to work with a boss who's particularly difficult, you then immediately get accosted on the street and asked relentless questions about your performance and the performance of your quote unquote teammates. Are you going to say anything constructive? I don't know if I can swear on this pod, but I'm going to. You're going to say tantamount of fuck all if you can collect yourself, because you have to go into some sort of self-preservation, right? You have to.
Yeah.
So,
it's just the sheer nature. You're a really good person to ask, right? Because you're a journalist, right? You're someone who has interviewed people. Yes, okay, maybe it was the music scene, slightly different, but the concept is still the same. Right. You're someone who has to think, prepare, and understand, and look at ways to ask questions, especially for people that maybe you see more than once, let's put it that way, and you've got to come up with ways of asking interesting questions, finding new ways to ask different things. And I just think these days, because I'm with you on this, I think these days the style and the level of the interviews that take place on press conferences in particular, the questions, they're just there for clickbait, and it's so frustrating to listen to.
Couldn't agree more. There is a lack of responsibility on both on several areas. I mean, obviously, I think the league itself has to be more protective of the people it's supposedly working for. They don't care. They're obliged to fulfill whatever the contract demands of the money that they're getting are, and I think that's with increasingly less protection for let's say for managers and players, especially in these media areas. I think fans have to be smarter and have to stop yearning or demanding these, this constant blast of commentary from players and from managers. And you're absolutely right. I think in this volume-based society where it is clickbait, where nobody actually does seem to care about a story or a theory, I think that journalists have a responsibility that they're reneging on.
I'll give you an example of from my world, so Brighton and Hove Albion, right? I'll give you an example of what I felt was such a weird question, a lazy question to ask. So a couple of weeks ago, there was Crystal Palace versus Brighton, right? A grudge match.
Yeah, a small game in your calendar.
A little grudge match, right? Okay, so they asked the Brighton manager, Fabian Hersler. This is one of the questions that they asked him. They asked him, who would you rather have as a striker for your team, Danny Welbeck or Jean-Philippe Mateta, the day before the game? Honestly, this is a grown person, a grown journalist asking the manager that question.
Yeah, and of course, what are you going to get?
Exactly.
Every time you ask a question of anyone, number one, you have to be aware that you have a finite amount of time. To your point, whether you've known them for years or whether you interact with them on a regular basis, week in, week out, as many of these beat reporters do with a manager, you have a finite amount of time. And you have to respect that time. You have to respect it by hopefully putting forward a question that actually maybe helps break the monotony for them. I mean, how many wonderful questions are there you could ask about Brighton, Crystal Palace?
Well, exactly. Especially this was the best he came up with.
Especially if Fabian Hersler, who, with respect, will probably not have grown up with the grudge in quite the way that, that many of Brighton supporters and Palace supporters have. So, yeah, there's no, when you look at a question like that, there's no net gain from it.
No.
He knows that. His press officer's going to know that. And so you're left with a situation where it's like 2 wasted minutes. Right?
Well, that's exactly what it was.
It must have been, yeah.
PRs
will then teach managers to use situations like that to just bang out another agenda.
Yeah, it's a good point you mentioned there about sort of the PR side of things and preparing. There's so much media training now that there's very limited opportunity for you to get raw feedback from a manager or even a player. Before we had this recording today, I wanted to sort of look into some things and try and understand, were things better in the old days? You know what I mean? And I didn't actually have to go back too far. So I don't know if you remember this, I picked out a couple of things around player interviews. Because players, they'll feel passionate about things, when things happen. But nowadays I find they're a little bit too saturated and they're very clean cut. and the media training is there. You know, they know exactly what to say.
Absolutely. There's one player actually who stood out for me in the last few years, and as being someone who, whenever he is interviewed, actually sounds really interesting because he never says the same thing twice, and that's Bernardo Silva from Manchester City. If you get the chance, catch a couple of his appearances, because when he says something, it's really quite eye-opening. You know, it's really quite good.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I was so I went back in time to try and find some sort of other interviews that were a bit more interesting, and there was a couple that sprung to mind, right? So one was, do you remember, right? You'll remember this, right? If I give you a date, January transfer deadline day 2013, right? Can you guess what I'm going to say here? So
I may be, but why not? Save us all. Tell me.
Peter Odemwingie.
Oh,
right?
God.
So this was a story.
So sad.
This was
really sad.
This was like such a great story, right? So the former West Brom Albion man, right?
Yeah.
And he was completely disillusioned with playing for West Brom. He didn't want to play for West Brom anymore. And there were rumours on deadline day, and this was like 2013. This is when it was all like proper, full strength deadline day.
Yeah.
And there were rumours that QPR were interested in him.
That's right.
So he got in a car and he drove from West Brom without the club's permission. He just went down QPR and sat outside Loftus Road in his car. Yeah. And that moment was perfectly captured by a Sky Sports News interviewer who chucked a microphone on the window, tapped on the window, and he gave a little interview. And just the fact that he was trying to badmouth the club, saying, I've had enough, we're not getting on, I want to move, I'm hoping this is going to go through. Yeah. And unfortunately, it didn't happen. No. And he had to trudge all the way back. And he was actually with them for another year until he left. Yeah. So like those sorts of moments when you think of yourself, like you're in your lowest ebb, you're trying to get something done. He's gone completely on a whim. Yeah. And there's someone there with a camera and a microphone.
Yeah. Yeah. No, unfortunately, society demands this sort of scrutiny of people who are quote unquote in sports or entertainment or politics, whatever. We demand this scrutiny, and you have to question. What the level of our appetite is. If that's, I mean, are we really just going to continue to gorge on junk? I mean, it's awful. I think it's a terrible thing. Totally I felt very sorry for him. But again, it's like, Sky can only be what we want it to be, right? And people keep on consuming this. They really do, And I just, it doesn't. Let's look at this as well, because it could potentially get worse. Albeit, as we were just discussing off air, there's been sort of seemingly a hold off. But as I understand it, the new rules that were put into place last season by the Premier League, supposedly to be executed from this season on, were winning managers can give halftime interviews and substituted players can be interviewed before the 85th minute, with a 2-question limit for each. And you apparently had to pick 2 of these 3 as a football club: half-time interview with player or coach, interview for players who are subbed off, or dressing room broadcast. You had to pick 2 of those 3. These are 3 of the demands that were put forward, and in some concession, I say that with my tongue firmly in my cheek, I understand that the half-time interview can be with the assistant manager. Well, here's something that would improve things for football, would be if half the press conferences could be done by various members of the coaching staff. Why not elect, if you've got a coaching staff, which most clubs have, of 3 other coaches behind your manager, why not elect and do a round robin of those 4? Why not? Why not have the manager do no more than 1 press conference a week before the major game of the week, whichever.
Of those different categories and things, the one that really sticks out to me is the one that we haven't seen this season yet in particular. And that is, so last season, right? So the season before these rules came in, right, Sky Sports actually trialled 1 interview with a substituted player. And I think it was Bournemouth. It was Marcus Tavernier.
Yes, right? I couldn't find it. I wanted to find it. I couldn't find it. You saw it though, didn't you?
Yeah, I did. And again, it's like, what do you expect the person to say? They're hoping they're hoping for a really stressed, annoyed player or something to come off and say something, but it's not going to happen this day and age. It was a really boring, yes, yeah, we've changed our tactics, yeah, we're going to keep pushing, okay, bye. What do you expect him to say?
And I mean, this is, again, we're going back to the problem with football today. And one of the biggest problems is that we're always looking for a reaction. The only reason that any broadcaster would interview a footballer having just been substituted would be to see if they can get a reaction that's then going to cause a chain reaction through a fan group or through the internet or through the whole troll nation. I mean, how on earth is that productive for our game?
I agree. I agree. And it's I think the other side of this is, I mean, you just sort of mentioned it there, like last season and this season, and you've talked about Ange Postecoglou already. But last season, right, as a manager who has won lots of things around the world, not just, okay, fair enough, we Premier League, it's the best league in the world, but this is a well-respected international manager, right?
Yes, quite.
And he came to the Premier League, and I don't know, I felt like there was an element of, maybe it was connected to him being Australian, I don't know. There was a feeling that there was something there that no one quite respected him. And throughout the season, because, fair enough, Tottenham didn't have a great league season, there was constant goading in the interviewing, constantly going on about this one quote that he kept saying about him always winning in the second season, or talking about the number of injuries, and it was just a constant grind at him, and you could see it. It was completely antagonising him. How did you, as a Spurs fan, how did you feel about that throughout the season?
No, I was appalled by the whole thing. I was appalled by the behaviour he came under. Whether I've liked a manager or not, it becomes somewhat irrelevant to the fact that when they're our manager, I will support them. He was exceptionally poorly treated. And I will say this, and I'll name the reporter that really annoyed me on this, was the Guardian's Jonathan Liu. Took aim at him several times with what I consider to be some of the cheapest pot shots, semi-assassination jobs I've seen on a modern manager, from someone who is, a very good writer and who should expect better of themselves, but who played to the gallery. And I saw a lot of actually, quote unquote, respected media playing to the gallery with exactly the sort of tropes you're talking about, specifically around him being, some farmer. In this case, bringing his Australian heritage into things, which of course I think is largely irrelevant.
No, absolutely. And it just felt like that. It felt like he was an easy target for some reason, and I didn't like it.
He became an easy target, and he was also the sort of guy who would just sit there and take it. Maybe a little bit of machoism on his part, like, I can take it, whatever. I mean, there was a bit of that, which I didn't have a problem with per se, but I can see that it could rub some people up the wrong way, because he was certainly a little bit more towards the old school of manager in that regard than the new. However, the first line of defence is usually yourself, and he was defending himself, and so good for him. Yeah, I thought the treatment was appalling all across the board. And then we get back to this point. He's doing press conference after press conference after press conference, answering the same questions. Yeah. I mean, and it seemed nonsensical. And to your point, there were so many interesting things to have asked him about last season. Yeah, anyway. Let's stop. I know, because it's exasperating. It really is.
No, I get it. And I think...
And he had the last laugh.
Well,
so
he
mic
did.
drop for him.
Yeah,
and that
true.
was a quote, by the way, Neil, that he did not just sit there, volunteer one sunny morning in August saying, by the way, hello, chaps, I'm going to tell you all that I win in my second season. He was pushed into that. They kept on mentioning it to him, and he turned around, I think, at some point, and possibly to his detriment, and possibly exasperated himself, made a comment to the nature of, well, I do, the statistics basically tell you I do win things in my second season.
It's fact. I mean, there's nothing else you can say, is there, really?
But then suddenly he had been like, well, you said this and you said this. It's like, well, it's not. Context is everything. There's another thing, modern football, things I hate. Where's the context? Anyway, that's another time.
No, you're absolutely true. I did I did another one of these episodes with Mike Johnston, who works for BBC 5 Live, and he was talking about the impact of social media, which is a whole other episode if any of you want to have a listen. But context is a big one. You're absolutely right, and that's part of it, and the time is almost upon us. There was a couple of things I just wanted to pick up on the lighter side of some of these, and when I was looking back at some of the older sort of manager interviews, some of the things came flooding back, and it just made me think that nowadays we don't get them, but back in the day, as in, previous to sort of maybe 2015 on, things used to be a little bit different. And there were a couple in particular that just really rang a bell. Nigel Pearson, manager of Leicester, with his "You are an ostrich" quote. If you ever get a chance to do it, have a look. It's one of the best things I've seen for a while. He just takes umbrage to a particular question. He can't believe it's being asked.
I think
so. He says to the reporter, "Are you an ostrich? Do you have your head in the sand? You don't look like an ostrich." And he just kept going on it.
I remember that. It was great.
It's just one of the great ones. And then the other one, from a manager's point of view, it's very quick. One of my favourite, which is Gennaro Gattuso, the Italian sort of hard man, who took charge of Greek club Crete for literally 6 months. And he came up with one of the best phrases, which when you look at it on YouTube and you see the press conference, it's brilliant, because he's speaking in Italian and English all at the same time, muddling up the words. And he's got a translator sitting next to him. And obviously the translator's going crazy trying to change all the words to Greek so that everyone can hear what's going on. And there's this moment right at the end of the press conference where he just says,
"Because in my life, one people they give me present. I don't give present for the players.
Γιατί στη ζωή μου κανένας δεν μου κάνει ένα δώρο και ούτε εγώ κάνω δώρα στους παίχτες.
Sometimes may be good, sometimes may be shit.
Καμιά φορά είναι καλό, καμιά φορά είναι κακό.
And that's it. And you could just see the translator just go, not even know what to do. And it's just a wonderful little moment.
We'll have to. I must throw in. I'll say that I think that of all the modern managers in the last 5 to 10 years, I think that Jurgen Klopp was probably one of the best value for press conferences, considering the volume of them he had to do versus the level of engagement he certainly managed to get from me. I would watch and listen, and he never seemed to be on automat, which was good.
I agree.
And I think Thomas Frank is also really good with the press, but I think what he's learning at Tottenham is that it's a different world than when you're at Brentford, and that you can't quite get away with being as matey and as honest as he's being. And I think the cracks are just starting to appear there. That's another topic. I'm dragging you out of your time frame. So
absolutely fine. It's absolutely fine. I've really enjoyed it, actually. And listen, I suppose what I'll do for the people watching is I'm going to close this podcast with probably my favourite player interview of all time. So I'll just set it up so people realise what it is. And it was just the season before VAR came in. And it was a wonderful moment, and probably people will remember as soon as I say the name, Charlie Austin, who had a microphone stuck under his face the second he came off a pitch after a 1-1 draw for Southampton against Watford, where he had 2 goals disallowed that day, a last-minute one in particular for offside that was never offside. And he absolutely went at it with this interviewer about the need for VAR. And the best thing about it all was after he went mental and everyone laughed at it, about 2 weeks later, someone decided to put that clip to the theme of Park Life by Blur. And it just worked. Just worked perfectly. So I'll chuck that on the end of this podcast. So have a listen. Wait till the end, guys. But for now, Steff, I really appreciate you coming on. Thank you so much for being my guest.
Thanks very much for having me on, Neil. Much appreciated.
Thank you. And listen, it's been a blast. And if you want to come on another time, you've got something else you want to get off your chest, just let me know.
It's a big chest and there's plenty on it.
Thank you so much,
I'm an old
Steff.
grump, so there's much more to be said.
Thank you very much. And listen, thank you to you for listening. I really appreciate giving us the time to listen to The Trouble with Football. Please try and like and subscribe as much as you can, and maybe leave us a review, so we can spread the word. And finally, just remember that in football, it's the annoyances that keeps us talking. So see you next time for more chat about The Trouble with Football.
They said it's offside, hit my, I didn't. I did twice, hit me, Bob done, that's why I done Foster. The best league in the world, the most watched league in the world. Give them all the help they need, because clearly they cost us 2 points today. It's a joke. Put all that to bed, this week worked hard, come here to get 3 points. We deserve 3 points today, we've been let down by the officials, that's why we didn't get 3 points.